She signed the divorce papers in tears, tore up the pregnancy test and left. 5 years later, rain lashed against the tall glass windows of the Manhattan penthouse the night Alyssa Bennett made the most devastating decision of her life. She stared down at the divorce papers spread across the mahogany desk, each word a blade cutting deeper into her heart. Each sentence, each paragraph, each legal phrase designed to erase 7 years of marriage in the space of a few pages. Across the room, Ethan Prescott stood with his back turned to her, the man she'd promised to spend her life with, the man she'd given her whole heart to, the man who was now a complete stranger to her. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid, his face hidden from view, shielding emotions she could no longer read. He wouldn't look at her. He wouldn't speak to her. He wouldn't acknowledge that their marriage, once so full of promise and hope and dreams about children and growing old together, was being dissolved in silence and heartbreak. Outside, the New York City skyline glittered with indifference, millions of lights, millions of lives. And Alyssa watched them together, her daughter and the man she loved, and she felt complete in a way she hadn't felt in 5 years. Years passed. Ella grew up with both her parents. She had Ethan's blue eyes and his intelligence. She had Alyssa's kindness and her creativity. She was a perfect combination of the two people who loved her most. When she was 12 years old, Ella asked her parents to tell her the whole story. She wanted to know why her father had missed the first 5 years of her life. Alyssa and Ethan sat down with her and told her everything. They told her about the charity gala where they'd met. They told her about their marriage. They told her about the scandal and the misunderstanding. They told her about the divorce papers and the moment Ethan had protected her from the falling light. They told her about second chances and the power of forgiveness. And they told her that sometimes love doesn't work out the first time. But that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for. Ella cried when she heard the story. But she also understood. She understood that her parents had made mistakes, but that they had also made the choice to fix those mistakes. She understood that her family was built on a foundation of honesty and second chances. And she understood that love, real love, is something worth fighting for, even when you've already lost once. By the time Ella was in high school, Ethan and Alyssa had built a life that was solid and real. Ethan had become a different kind of businessman. He still ran his real estate company, but his priorities had shifted. He was home for dinner most nights. He was present at school events. He volunteered regularly at the youth center, the same youth center where he'd met Alyssa at that charity gala so many years ago. Alyssa had started her own event planning business. She was successful and respected in Portland's business community, but more importantly, she was happy. She had her daughter, she had her husband. She had a life that felt authentic and meaningful. One evening, when Ella was 16 years old, Ethan took Alyssa back to the rooftop where they'd first met. Not the actual rooftop in New York, but a rooftop in Portland that overlooked the city lights in the same way. He was nervous. Alyssa could tell. "What's this about?" she asked. "I just wanted to remember," he said. "I wanted to stand here with you and remember where we started." They stood together, looking out at the city. "I think about that night a lot," Ethan said. "The night we met. You walked up to me and told me I looked like I'd rather be getting a root canal." Alyssa laughed. "I can't believe I said that to you." "I'm glad you did," he said. "Because if you hadn't, I might have never met you. I might have spent my entire life alone, building empires that meant nothing because there was no one to share them with." He pulled her close to him. "And then I lost you," he said. "And I spent 5 years in the darkest place imaginable. I thought I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." "But you didn't lose me," Alyssa said softly. "I was always there. Our daughter was always there. Fate just needed to bring us back together." "That falling light," Ethan said. "I've thought about it so many times. If that light hadn't fallen, I might never have known about Ella. I might have spent the rest of my life not knowing she existed." "But it did fall," Alyssa said, "and you protected her. You were willing to die for her without even knowing she was yours." "That's what love does," Ethan said. "It makes you willing to do anything for another person. It makes you brave in ways you never thought possible." He took her hand. "I have something to tell you," he said. "Something I've been keeping secret." Alyssa's heart raced. What? Remember the scandal? He asked. Remember how we thought you'd leaked the confidential information? Yes, she said, but we found out later that it was one of your employees. That's what everyone thinks, Ethan said, but the truth is more complicated. I knew it wasn't you after about 3 days of investigation, but I was scared. I was scared of losing my business. I was scared of what people would think. I was scared of the future, so I pushed you away instead of dealing with my fear. Alyssa didn't say anything. It took me 5 years to realize that fear is the enemy of love, Ethan continued. That when you let fear drive your decisions, you lose everything that matters. I let fear make me doubt you. I let fear make me sign divorce papers without even trying to save our marriage, and I let fear keep me from fighting for you. He squeezed her hand. I don't want to be ruled by fear anymore, he said. I want to be ruled by love, by faith in you, by faith in us, by faith that we can face anything together. Ethan, Alyssa said, her eyes filling with tears. I already asked you to marry me once, he said, and you said yes. But I want to ask you again, not because we need more paperwork or more vows, but because I want to remind you and myself that I choose you every single day. I choose to believe in you. I choose to trust you. I choose to love you. I choose you too, Alyssa said. That night, they went home to Ella. She was in the kitchen doing homework when they walked in. How was the rooftop? She asked, barely looking up from her books. It was good, Alyssa said. Your father was being sentimental. I was remembering where your mother and I met, Ethan said. The charity gala, Ella said, looking up now. The story you guys have told me 1,000,000 times. The story we have to keep telling, Alyssa said, smiling at Ethan, because it reminds us of something important. What's that? Ella asked. That second chances are real, Ethan said. That love is worth fighting for. That even when you think you've lost everything, sometimes life gives you another opportunity to get it right. Ella rolled her eyes in that way teenagers do, but Alyssa could see that she was listening, that she was understanding something profound about the nature of love and commitment and family. Years later, when Ella was in college, she would tell people the story of her parents. She would tell them about the charity gala where her father and mother had met. She would tell them about the scandal that drove them apart. She would tell them about the pregnancy test and the divorce papers and the 5 years of living as a secret. She would tell them about the falling light and the moment her father had protected her, without even knowing she was his daughter. She would tell them that her parents had taught her something invaluable, that love isn't about perfection or getting everything right the first time. Love is about showing up. It's about fighting for the people who matter. It's about being willing to admit when you're wrong and working to make it right. Love is about second chances. If this story touched your heart, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to make the hardest choice of your life? Have you ever felt like you had to walk away from someone you loved? Have you ever been given a second chance with someone? Drop your answers in the comments below. I want to hear your story, because I believe that everyone has a story about love and loss and redemption. And if this story reminded you that true love is worth fighting for, even when you've already lost once, then please like this video. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that will touch your heart and remind you what matters in life. Hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when we post a new story. Because life is too short to waste time with people who don't fight for you. Life is too short to hold grudges and refuse second chances. Life is too short not to tell the people you love exactly how much they mean to you. So go out there and tell them today. Don't wait for a falling light or a chance encounter to remind you of what you have. Tell them now. Thank you so much for watching this story. Thank you for letting Alyssa and Ethan's journey touch your heart. We'll see you next time with another story that will remind you of the power of love, the beauty of second chances, and the incredible things that can happen when we choose to fight for what matters most. Take care of yourself. Tell the people you love that you love them. And always, always believe in second chances. Until next time, inside this penthouse, a marriage was dying without a sound. Alyssa picked up the pen with trembling hands. She looked at the signature line. She thought about all the times she'd signed her name as Mrs. Ethan Prescott. She thought about the day they'd gotten married in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. She thought about how happy they'd been, how complete, how absolutely certain they were that they'd found their forever. But forever, she was learning, had an expiration date. She signed her name, Alyssa Bennett, going back to her maiden name, going back to who she was before him. Then she pushed the papers across the desk and walked toward the door. Ethan still didn't turn around. She waited for him to say something, anything, one word, one plea, one reason to stay. But there was only silence, and in that silence, she made a choice that would define the next 5 years of her life. Before I continue with this story, I want you to tell me where you're watching from and what time is it. And if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss my upcoming story. Now let me tell you what happened before that night. Let me tell you how two people who loved each other more than anything in the world ended up signing away their marriage without even fighting to save it. It all started at a charity gala 5 years earlier. Alyssa was working as a marketing consultant for one of New York's most prestigious firms. She wasn't particularly interested in attending the gala that night. Charity events felt obligatory, fake, full of people pretending to care about causes they didn't understand, using philanthropy as an excuse to network and show off their wealth. But her boss had insisted, so she put on a black dress, she did her makeup, she went. The gala was being held at a rooftop venue overlooking Central Park. The view was spectacular. The champagne was expensive. The crowd was exactly what she'd expected. Wealthy people in designer clothes, air-kissing each other, talking about their portfolios and their vacation homes. Alyssa was standing near the bar, trying to look busy so no one would approach her when she saw him. He was tall, dark hair, a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But what caught her attention wasn't his appearance or his obvious wealth. It was the fact that he looked deeply uncomfortable. He was standing near a group of investors, clearly trying to make conversation, but his eyes kept drifting away. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Alyssa recognized that feeling. She walked over to him without really thinking about it. "You look like you'd rather be getting a root canal," she said. He turned to her and smiled, actually smiled, a real smile, not the practiced business smile she saw from every other man in the room. "Is it that obvious?" he asked. "Very," she said. "I'm Alyssa, by the way." "Ethan." He didn't say his last name. He didn't mention his company or his real estate empire or any of the things that usually defined men like him. He just said his first name, and then he asked her if she wanted to get away from the crowd. They ended up on a quiet balcony overlooking the park, and they talked for hours. She told him about her dreams of starting her own marketing firm. She told him about her childhood in upstate New York. She told him about the books she loved, and the movies that made her cry, and the kind of life she actually wanted. Not the impressive life, but the real one. He told her about growing up with limited means, about his mother working 3 jobs to send him to college, about the pressure he felt to build an empire because she'd sacrificed so much for him. He told her that sometimes success felt hollow, that money couldn't buy the thing he actually wanted, which was someone to share it with, someone real, someone who saw him as a person, not as a portfolio. "Is that someone at this party?" she asked him. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." They started dating 2 weeks later, and it was the best decision either of them had ever made. For 2 years they were inseparable. They'd spend weekends exploring the city, going to small museums and independent bookstores and hole-in-the-wall restaurants that served the best food. He'd call his mother every Sunday, and eventually Alyssa started calling her too. Ethan would surprise her with flowers on random Tuesday afternoons just because he was thinking about her. She'd make elaborate dinners in his penthouse kitchen, and they'd eat by candlelight, talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to his business associates, and she saw how much people respected him. But she also saw something they didn't: the person behind the success. The man who was still kind to the cleaning staff. The man who donated millions to youth centers in underserved neighborhoods. The man who cried when he watched certain movies. She loved all of it. She loved him completely. When he proposed, it was simple and perfect. He took her back to the rooftop where they'd first met. The same venue, the same view of Central Park, and in a quiet corner where no one was watching, he got down on one knee and asked her to spend her life with him. She said yes before he even finished the question. They were married 6 months later. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. Alyssa wore a simple white dress. Ethan wore a classic black suit. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about always choosing each other, always being honest, always fighting for their relationship. For the first year of marriage, they were happy. Truly happy. The kind of happy that makes you believe that love is enough, that if you love someone deeply enough, you can overcome anything. But then, reality started to crack that happiness into pieces. Ethan's company was expanding. He was taking on bigger and bigger projects. The real estate deals were becoming more complex, more high stakes, more dependent on perfect execution and flawless information. He started working later. He started bringing work home. He started being distant in the ways that successful men often become distant, physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. Alyssa understood. She supported him. She told herself that this was temporary, that once the big deals closed, things would go back to normal. But then the scandal happened. Ethan was working on a massive development project worth over $200 million. It was the biggest deal of his career. It would solidify his position as one of New York's top developers. The project was confidential. Only a handful of people knew the details. Only a handful of people had access to the files. And then, one day, a competing firm bid on a development that used the exact same strategy Ethan had planned. It was too similar to be coincidence. Someone had leaked the information. Ethan's company launched an internal investigation immediately, and within days, they had settled on a suspect, Alyssa. She'd been present at the meeting where the strategy was discussed. She had access to files in Ethan's office. She'd been in his company offices regularly. And someone, no one would tell her who, had reported seeing her near the server room. The accusation was devastating. It was based on circumstantial evidence. There was no proof that she'd accessed the files. There was no email trail. There was no document showing that she'd downloaded or forwarded anything. Just suspicion. Just whispers. Just the implication that she might have been taking money under the table from a competing firm, that she might have been sabotaging her husband for profit, that she might have never really loved him at all. When Ethan brought it up to her, his voice was careful, measured, like he was asking a question he'd been rehearsing. "Did you leak the information?" he asked. Alyssa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "No," she said immediately. "Ethan, no. I would never do that. You know me. You know I would never do anything to hurt you or your business." But the look in his eyes, that tiny flicker of doubt, told her that maybe he didn't know that, maybe he wasn't completely sure. They had their worst fight that night. Alyssa begged him to believe her. She begged him to trust her. She reminded him of everything they'd promised each other. She reminded him that love meant standing by someone even when the world was against them. "How can you even question this?" she asked him, tears streaming down her face. "How can you look at me and think I'm capable of betraying you like that?" Ethan stood across the room from her, his face hard. "I want to believe you," he said, "but you have to understand what's at stake here. My entire company is on the line. My reputation is on the line. My investors are demanding answers." "So am I," she cried. "I'm your wife. Don't I matter more than your investors?" "Of course you do," he said, but his voice wasn't convincing. "Is there anything you're not telling me?" he asked. "Anything at all?" And that was the question that broke everything, not an accusation, just a question. But what he was really asking was whether she'd done it. What he was really saying was that he wasn't sure she was innocent. What he was really doing was choosing his business over her. Alyssa walked out of the apartment that night and didn't come back for 2 days. She stayed in a hotel. She cried. She tried to call him multiple times, but he didn't answer. When she finally came home, she found divorce papers sitting on the kitchen table. He hadn't even served them through a lawyer. He'd just printed them out and left them there, like a note, like a goodbye written in legal language. She went to the bathroom and took a pregnancy test on a whim. She'd been feeling nauseous for days, and she'd assumed it was stress, the scandal, the fighting, the impending collapse of her marriage. But 2 pink lines appeared on the stick, 2 pink lines that changed everything. She was pregnant. She was going to have Ethan's baby. A daughter, the doctor would later tell her, a little girl with his eyes and her smile. Alyssa held that pregnancy test in her trembling hands, and she felt something shift inside her. Hope. Maybe this would bring them back together. Maybe the baby would remind him of what they had. Maybe when she told him about their child, he would remember why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. She drove straight to his office building. She rehearsed what she would say 100 times in her head. She imagined his face when she told him. She pictured him immediately apologizing, realizing he'd been wrong, understanding that she would never do anything to hurt him or his business. She pictured him pulling her into his arms and telling her that none of it mattered, that their love mattered, that their family mattered. But when she walked into their apartment that evening, he was standing in the living room, wearing his coat like he was on his way out. He didn't greet her. He didn't ask how her day was. His first words were the words she would never forget for the rest of her life. The lawyer will send over the papers. Not a question about her well-being, not an opening for conversation, not a chance to talk things through, just a cold statement about divorce papers. No emotion, no hesitation, like he'd already made his decision and she was simply a logistical problem to be solved. Alyssa opened her mouth to tell him about the baby. She opened her mouth to tell him that she was pregnant, that they were going to be parents, that despite everything they could still build a family together. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the coldness in his eyes. Maybe it was the way he wouldn't even look at her. Maybe it was the realization that a man who could look at his wife with such indifference would never truly fight for their child. So she didn't tell him. She went to his home office and found the divorce papers already prepared by his lawyer. She sat down at his desk and she read through them. Each page was a knife wound. She was signing away her marriage. She was signing away her right to his assets. She was signing away any legal claim to his life. And she was doing it without telling him that she was carrying his child. She picked up the pen. She looked at the signature line, and then she signed. Her hand was shaking so badly that her signature looked like someone else's, but it was her name on that paper, Alyssa Bennett. Going back to being Alyssa Bennett instead of Mrs. Ethan Prescott, going back to who she was before him. After she signed, she went to the bathroom and she tore up the pregnancy test. She watched the pink lines disappear as the paper fell into pieces. She flushed it away, and then she walked out of the penthouse and out of Ethan's life without saying goodbye. She packed a single suitcase, she took some money from her savings account, and she drove. She drove north, out of the city, away from the penthouse and the investors, and the scandal, and the man who had chosen his business over his marriage. She drove until she reached Oregon, a small town called Portland near the coast, where she didn't know anyone and no one knew her, where she could disappear, where she could raise her daughter in peace. 5 years passed. 5 years is a long time to live a secret. 5 years is a long time to raise a child alone, while knowing that her father doesn't even know she exists. Alyssa found work as an event planner in Portland. She was good at it. She was organized and creative and professional. She managed weddings and corporate events and charity galas. Ironically, galas like the one where she'd met Ethan. She rented a small house on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy. Nothing like the penthouse. Just a comfortable home with a backyard where her daughter could play. She named her daughter Ella. Ella had Ethan's piercing blue eyes. She had his dark hair. She had his smile. That rare, genuine smile that emerged when she was truly happy. But she had Alyssa's spirit, her creativity, her kindness, her ability to see the good in people even when they didn't deserve it. Ella asked about her father sometimes. "Where is Daddy?" she asked when she was 3 years old, noticing that other children had 2 parents. Alyssa had to get creative with her answers. "Your daddy is very far away," she said, "but he loves you very much. He couldn't be with us." It was the truth, even if it wasn't the whole truth. She showed Ella pictures sometimes, just pictures she'd seen in the news or saved from years ago, pictures of a man with blue eyes and dark hair, "That's your daddy," she'd say. "His name is Ethan." Ella would look at the pictures, trying to understand why her father was in photographs instead of sitting at their dinner table. Alyssa never let herself look at news about Ethan. She didn't search for him on the internet. She didn't follow his business ventures. She didn't allow herself to wonder if he'd ever married again or if he'd found happiness with someone else. It hurt too much. So she built a wall around that part of her life and she threw away the key. She focused on being the best mother she could be. She made sure Ella had everything she needed. She worked hard. She saved money. She created a life that was modest, but real and true. She made friends with other single mothers. She joined a book club. She volunteered at Ella's school. She built a community in Portland. And slowly, very slowly, she began to heal. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the scar. The scar was Ethan. The scar was the love they'd had and lost. The scar was the night she'd signed away her marriage and torn up a pregnancy test and walked out of his life forever. 5 years later, Alyssa received a call from her boss. There was a high-profile charity gala coming to Portland, a major fundraiser for a youth center. The event was going to be huge. Celebrities, wealthy donors, important people. They needed Alyssa to plan it. Alyssa almost said no. Galas reminded her of Ethan. They reminded her of the night they'd met. They reminded her of a life she used to have. But she needed the money. The event planning business had been slow. Bills were piling up. Ella needed new clothes for school. So she said yes. She threw herself into the planning. She booked venues and caterers and musicians. She organized every detail with the precision that had become her trademark. Ella came with her to the venue for final preparations the day of the event. She was 5 years old now, smart, observant, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's gentle spirit. Alyssa had dressed her in a simple blue dress. She was playing near the stage while Alyssa arranged the final touches, making sure everything was perfect. The venue was stunning, elegant, just like the galas from 5 years ago. As Alyssa was checking the lighting system, she heard a voice she would recognize anywhere, even after 5 years of silence. "Excuse me, I'm looking for the event planner." Alyssa turned slowly, and there he was. Ethan Prescott. Older, more distinguished, but unmistakably him. He looked exactly like she remembered, and completely different at the same time. His hair had streaks of gray at the temples. There were lines around his eyes, lines that suggested he'd spent 5 years frowning. His expensive suit fit him perfectly, but his posture was different. Less open, less trusting, more guarded. He was attending the gala on business, he explained. He was one of the major donors. The youth center was important to him. He'd heard the event was going to be spectacular. He was being polite, professional, like he was talking to a stranger, like he'd completely forgotten her. Alyssa's heart stopped. She felt dizzy. She felt like she was falling. "You're the event planner?" he asked, studying her face. She could see him trying to place her, trying to figure out if he knew her from somewhere. And then his eyes went wide. His jaw clenched. He recognized her. "Alyssa," he whispered. Before she could answer, before she could even breathe, Ella ran up to them. She'd been playing near the stage, but something had caught her attention. She ran to Alyssa and grabbed her hand. "Mommy, Mommy, look at the stage light, it's so bright." Ethan's eyes moved to Ella. He looked at her face. He saw his own blue eyes staring back at him. He saw his dark hair. He saw his smile. His whole body went rigid. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is Ella," Alyssa said quietly. She's my daughter." Ethan looked at the child. He looked at Alyssa. He looked back at the child. The math was happening in real time. The timeline. 5 years ago. The divorce. The baby. "How old is she?" he asked. 5, Alyssa said. Ethan's face went pale. He reached out to touch Ella's hair, but before he could, something went terribly wrong. The stage lighting system malfunctioned. One of the large overhead lights, weighing hundreds of pounds, started to fall from the ceiling. It was directly above where Ella stood. Time seemed to slow down. Alyssa saw it falling. She saw her daughter's face looking up at the light, confused, not understanding the danger. And then Ethan moved, without hesitation, without thinking, without any consideration for his own safety. He grabbed both Alyssa and Ella and pulled them out of the way, shielding them both with his body as the light crashed to the ground exactly where they'd been standing seconds before. The sound was deafening, metal on concrete, a shower of sparks, dust filling the air. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then people started screaming. Security rushed in. Someone called 911. Sirens filled the air. But Ethan didn't move. He was still holding them both, still protecting them, still making sure they were okay. Alyssa felt him shaking. Or maybe she was shaking, or maybe they were both shaking. Ella was crying. She was asking why the light fell. She was asking if they were okay. Ethan pulled back just enough to look at their faces, to make sure they were truly unharmed. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're both okay. I have you, I have you." The paramedics arrived and checked them over. Miraculously, they were fine, just shaken, just terrified, but physically unharmed. As the chaos continued around them, as people were being interviewed and reports were being filed, Ethan pulled Alyssa aside. He couldn't take his eyes off Ella. "She's mine," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Alyssa said softly. "You were pregnant," he said, realization dawning. "That night, when I asked for the divorce, you were pregnant and you didn't tell me." "You didn't give me a chance," Alyssa said, her voice breaking. "You just handed me divorce papers and walked away. I went to tell you about the baby, and you said the lawyer will send over the papers without even looking at me." "Alyssa," he whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't understand what you were trying to say." "I was scared," she said. "I was terrified of raising a child alone. But I was more terrified of you rejecting her the way you'd rejected me. So I left. I tore up the pregnancy test. I left the penthouse, and I never came back." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "5 years," he said. 5 years, and I missed everything. I missed her being born. I missed her first smile. I missed her first word. I missed her first day of school. I missed everything." "Yes," Alyssa said quietly. Ethan looked at Ella. She was sitting on a bench nearby, wrapped in a blanket, eating a cookie that one of the paramedics had given her. She looked so small, so vulnerable, so much like him. "I have a daughter," he said, like he was saying it for the first time, like the reality of it was just hitting him. "You do," Alyssa said. "And her mother?" he asked, looking at Alyssa. "Where does that leave us?" Alyssa didn't know how to answer that question. The truth was, she'd spent 5 years trying not to love him. She'd spent 5 years trying to build a life without him. She'd spent 5 years telling herself that he'd made his choice and she'd made hers. But when he'd thrown himself in front of that falling light without hesitation, when he'd protected her daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world, when she'd seen the look on his face as he realized what he'd missed, she'd felt something crack open inside her chest. Hope. That night, after the event was over, and Ella had been put to bed at a hotel, Ethan came to Alyssa's room. They talked until sunrise. He told her about the last 5 years, about how, after she left, he'd realized that the scandal wasn't her fault. The investigation had eventually revealed that it was one of his junior employees who'd leaked the information, someone who'd been fired immediately. But by then, it was too late. Alyssa was gone. He'd tried to find her. He'd hired private investigators. He'd searched everywhere. But she'd disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no contact information, no trace. He'd spent 5 years wondering where she was, if she was happy, if she was safe. He'd never remarried. He'd never let himself get close to another woman. Because part of him, a huge part of him, had always known that he'd made a mistake, that he'd chosen his business over his marriage and lost everything that mattered. Alyssa told him about those 5 years too, about raising Ella alone, about the late nights and the financial struggles and the fear that Ella would grow up feeling abandoned by her father. She told him about the moment she'd decided not to tell him about the pregnancy. "I was so angry," she said, "and so hurt. But mostly, I was protecting our daughter. I didn't want her to know a father who didn't believe in her mother. I didn't want her to feel the rejection that I felt." "I was wrong," Ethan said. "I know that now. I was wrong to doubt you. I was wrong to let my business come between us. I was wrong to ask for a divorce without even fighting for our marriage. I was so incredibly wrong, Alyssa." She looked at him, and she could see the genuine regret in his eyes. She could see the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "I was scared," he continued. "The scandal made me doubt everything. I let fear make my decisions instead of love. And I've spent 5 years paying for that mistake." "I'm scared too," Alyssa said. "I'm scared of letting you back in. I'm scared of being hurt again. I'm scared of what this means for Ella. I'm scared that you'll want to be in her life and then change your mind." "I won't," Ethan said. "I promise you, Alyssa, I will never leave her. And I will never leave you again." "People make promises they can't keep," she said. "I know," he said, "but I'm asking you to trust me. One more time. Give me one more chance. Give us one more chance." He took her hand. "I should have never let you go," he whispered. "The biggest mistake of my life was signing those divorce papers and walking away from you. I'm asking you to help me fix that mistake." Alyssa felt tears running down her face. "You didn't just lose me, Ethan," she said. "You lost us. You lost 5 years with your daughter. You lost the life we were supposed to have." "I know," he said, "and I will spend the rest of my life making that up to both of you." They talked through the night. They cried together. They held each other. And slowly, very slowly, Alyssa felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to crumble. The next morning, Ethan asked to meet Ella properly. Alyssa was terrified. What if Ella didn't like him? What if she felt like a stranger to him? But when Ethan knelt down in front of Ella and looked into her blue eyes, eyes that matched his own, something magical happened. "Hi, Ella," he said. "I'm Ethan, and I'm your father." Ella looked at him with the innocence of a 5-year-old who doesn't understand the complexity of the adult world. "You're my daddy?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I am. I've missed so much of your life, and I'm so sorry for that. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to spend time with you now. I'd like to know you. I'd like to be your father." Ella looked at her mother. Alyssa nodded. Ella reached out and took Ethan's hand. "Okay," she said simply. "Do you want to play with my toys?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. "I would love to play with your toys," he said. Over the following weeks, Ethan made a choice. He scaled back his business. He delegated to people he trusted. He decided that money and success didn't matter as much as being present for the people he loved. He moved to Portland. He got a house near Alyssa's. He started spending time with Ella every day. He took her to school. He helped her with homework. He played with her toys and read her bedtime stories and taught her about the world. He became the father he should have been 5 years ago. And Alyssa watched him with their daughter, and she felt something shift inside her. She felt herself falling in love with him again, not for who he had been or who she'd thought he was, but for who he was becoming. A man willing to admit his mistakes, a man willing to change, a man willing to put his family first. 3 months after the charity gala, Ethan asked Alyssa to have dinner with him, just the two of them. Ella was with a babysitter. They went to a quiet restaurant overlooking the coast. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Halfway through dinner, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I know I have no right to ask this," he said. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've spent 5 years being absent from our daughter's life. I know that trust isn't something you can just give me back, like flipping a switch." "Ethan," Alyssa started to say, but he squeezed her hand gently and continued. "But I love you," he said. "I have loved you every single day for the past 5 years, even when you were gone, even when I didn't know where you were or if I'd ever see you again. I loved you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Alyssa's breath caught. "I know we're already divorced," he said, "but I'm asking you, Alyssa Bennett, if you would give me the honor of marrying you again. Not because of legal documents or contracts or anything like that, but because you are the love of my life. Because I want to wake up next to you every day for the rest of my life. Because I want to build a family with you and Ella. Because I want to spend every moment making up for the time I lost." He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring, not ostentatious, not trying to prove anything, just beautiful and elegant and perfect. "Will you marry me again?" he asked. Alyssa looked at him. This man who had hurt her so deeply, this man who had abandoned her when she'd needed him most, this man who was now asking for a second chance, and she realized that she had already forgiven him, that she had forgiven him the moment he'd thrown himself in front of that falling light to protect their daughter, that she had forgiven him the moment she'd seen the regret in his eyes, that she had forgiven him because she loved him. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you again." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They were married 6 months later, on the coast of Oregon, where Alyssa had built a life after leaving him. The wedding was small and intimate, just family and close friends, and Ella, who was the flower girl and who took her job very seriously, carefully dropping petals down the aisle. Ethan wore a classic black suit. Alyssa wore a simple white dress. The dress of a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. They exchanged new vows, not the same ones they'd written years ago in their penthouse, but new vows. Vows that acknowledged their past, vows that honored the pain they'd both endured, vows that committed them to building a future together, stronger this time, more honest this time, more aware of what they could lose. After the ceremony, Ethan took Alyssa and Ella to the penthouse he'd once called home. He'd kept it all those years, unchanged, like a shrine to the life he'd lost. That night, they walked through it together, and Alyssa saw it through new eyes. Not as a monument to wealth and success, but as a space where two people had once been happy. Ethan sold it the next week. He and Alyssa bought a new house in Portland. A home. Not a penthouse or a statement of success. Just a house with a backyard where Ella could play and where they could build a family. Ethan became a father in every sense of the word. He was there for Ella's 6th birthday, her 7th. He helped with homework. He attended school events. He read bedtime stories and gave advice and showed her that she was loved completely and unconditionally.